He was just 8, barefoot, hungry, and all alone on that cold highland. Every morning, he chased goats across the hills, not for fun, but to survive. Until one man, a stranger, slammed on his brakes and changed everything. A pale dawn broke over the highland, casting long blue shadows across the dewy grass. 8-year-old Eli Thompson trudged barefoot through the chilly morning mist, a crooked wooden staff in his small hand. He was up before the sun as always, chasing the family's herd of goats out to graze on the sparse plateau grass. The highland spread out around him, vast and lonely, with distant mountains serrating the horizon. In the early light, Eli's breath puffed white and wispy in the cold air. He shivered in his thin, threadbare flannel shirt, but he didn't dare complain. Frank, his stepfather, stood on the porch of their weather-beaten cabin on the hillside, a dark figure with arms crossed. Even from afar, Eli could feel Frank's stern gaze tracking his every move. "Get those goats moving, boy," Frank hollered, his voice cutting through the quiet dawn. Eli flinched and waved his arms to prod along a lagging nanny goat. His stomach rumbled with hunger. He hadn't had any breakfast, not even a crust of bread. Frank rarely fed him until after the morning chores were done, and sometimes not even then. As he guided the goats toward a brook that glimmered down in a ravine, Eli's mind wandered to memories of his mother. Mama had died just last year, and every day since felt like an uphill climb through sorrow. She had been the gentle warmth in this cold highland life. He could almost hear her voice in the rustle of the grass, urging him to be strong. "Mama, I'm trying," he thought silently, blinking away tears that he wouldn't let fall. He remembered how she used to sneak him biscuits and sing to him softly while tucking him into bed. Since her passing, those tender moments had been replaced by Frank's harsh commands and the lonely bleats of goats as his only lullaby. Eli's bare feet navigated the familiar path with care. Sharp pebbles and thistles pricked his soles, but he was used to that kind of pain. At 8 years old, he had learned not to cry out. The last time he'd cried in front of Frank, on the day of his mother's funeral no less, Frank had scolded him for acting like a baby and made him sleep outside with the goats as punishment. The memory made Eli's cheeks burn with shame and lingering hurt. A goat with a mottled grey coat trotted up to Eli and nuzzled at his hand. It was Daisy, the smallest doe, who often lingered near Eli as if sensing his sadness. Eli managed a faint smile and gently patted her head. "Hey there, girl," he whispered under his breath, his voice hoarse from a night of tears he couldn't shed in daylight. The goat gazed at him with gentle amber eyes. For a moment, he felt a tiny spark of warmth in his chest. Daisy's silent companionship made him feel just a little less alone. The sun was rising higher now, burning off the mist and revealing a clear blue autumn sky. The town below the highland was still cloaked in morning shadow, a handful of rooftops and a church spire poking above a line of trees. It looked peaceful from a distance, but Eli knew that within an hour or two the townsfolk would be bustling about, and Frank might head into town for supplies or to the tavern. Frank often left him alone on the ridge with the goats all day, expecting Eli to keep watch and prevent any from wandering off or falling prey to coyotes. Eli watched the goats as they scattered to nibble on patches of grass and weeds. His stomach clenched again. He recalled the taste of the cornbread Martha from town had once given him out of pity. It was the best thing he'd eaten in ages. Martha Whitaker was an old friend of his mother's and ran the local diner. She had known Eli since he was a toddler and occasionally slipped him leftovers when Frank wasn't looking. But Frank didn't like Eli accepting charity. Last time Martha handed Eli a sandwich behind Frank's back, Frank found out and flung the sandwich to the ground, grinding it into the dirt with his boot while forcing Eli to watch. "We don't need nobody's pity," Frank had growled that day. Eli had nodded obediently, stomach growling, and later ate what he could salvage of the squashed sandwich after Frank left the room. Thinking of Martha made Eli sigh. He wondered if she knew what his life was like now that Mama was gone. Probably not the full truth. Nobody did. In this small, isolated town, people minded their own business. Even if someone like Martha suspected Frank was too hard on him, what could they do? Frank was his stepfather and legal guardian. Folks were wary of interfering, especially with a man as hot-tempered as Frank Miller. As the morning wore on, the sun climbed and began to warm the earth, but Eli's chores were far from done. He had to keep the goats in sight, mend any breaks in the wire fencing on the far side of the pasture, and haul water from the brook to fill their trough back near the cabin. By midday, his shirt was soaked with sweat, and his stomach felt hollow. Still, he did everything expected of him as quickly and quietly as possible. The quicker he finished, the sooner he might get a bite to eat, if Frank was in a generous mood today. When Eli finally herded the goats back toward the homestead for their noon watering, he saw Frank waiting by the trough with a scowl. Frank was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, with sun-leathered skin and a perpetual frown etched into his brow. He jabbed a finger toward a gap in the fence Eli hadn't gotten to yet. "What have you been doing all morning, boy? Sleeping out there?" Frank barked. His words were slurred ever so slightly. Eli could smell the sour tang of whiskey on the air, even a few yards away. Frank must have started drinking earlier than usual. No, sir," Eli stammered softly. He quickly tied the water bucket to the post and started toward the broken section of fence. "I'll fix it right now. I'm sorry, Frank cut him off with a hard glare. "Useless," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Eli to hear. "Ain't worth the salt in your bread." He took a step forward, and instinctively Eli shrank back. Frank's boots crushed the dry grass as he loomed over the boy. For a moment, Eli thought Frank might raise his hand to strike him right then and there. The man's calloused hand twitched at his side, and Eli's heart hammered. But instead, Frank spat on the ground at Eli's feet. "Get that fence mended before I count to 50, or you'll get no lunch. And if any goat runs off through that gap, you'll be eating dirt for supper again. Understand?" he snarled. "Yes, sir," Eli whispered, eyes on the ground. He darted past Frank, keeping a wide berth to avoid any sudden kicks or grabs. As he knelt by the fence post and began twisting the wire with trembling hands, he felt Frank's eyes boring into his back for a few relentless seconds before the heavy footsteps retreated. Frank had gone inside the cabin, the screen door slamming behind him. Only then did Eli exhale the breath he'd been holding. His hands shook as he worked the wire through the post. Every fiber of his being was tired of the fear, the hunger, the aching loneliness. Up above, a red-tailed hawk circled in the brilliant sky. Eli paused to watch it glide freely on the wind. For a split second, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to be that hawk, to soar far away from here, to some place warm and safe and loving. A place where he didn't have to feel so scared all the time. The daydream passed as quickly as it came. Eli lowered his eyes back to the task at hand. This highland was the only home he knew, no matter how cruel its days could be. And at least for now, he had to survive one day at a time under Frank's roof. Little did he know that fate was about to set something unexpected in motion on this lonely highland, a chain of events that would change his life forever. That evening, the sky burned orange and red as the sun dipped toward the jagged peaks. Eli corralled the goats back into their pen behind the cabin, securing the rickety gate with a length of rope. His small body ached from the day's labor, and fear gnawed at his belly. Frank had been in a foul mood ever since noon, grumbling under his breath as he downed whiskey straight from the bottle. Eli had tried to stay out of his stepfather's way, silently going about feeding the goats a few handfuls of grain and refilling their water trough. As Eli double-checked the latch on the pen, he noticed one of the goats was missing. Daisy, the little grey doe who had comforted him earlier, was nowhere to be seen among the cluster of bleating animals. Panic fluttered in Eli's chest. He swiveled his head around the pasture, scanning the edges of the property. Dusk's shadows were creeping in, making it hard to see. Maybe she had wandered out beyond the fence when he was mending that broken section. He thought he'd fixed it in time, but what if he hadn't? Heart thudding, Eli hurried to the gap in the fence. The repair he'd done was still holding, but a few tufts of grey goat fur caught on a lower strand of wire told the story. Daisy must have squeezed through earlier before he fixed it. Perhaps she had gone down by the brook or into the thicket of birch trees beyond the ridge. Eli gulped. He knew he should tell Frank right away, but the thought of it made his knees weak. Maybe he could find Daisy on his own before Frank even noticed. Yes, if he was quick, he might coax her back into the pen, and Frank would be none the wiser. Summoning courage, Eli slipped through the fence gap and jogged toward the tree line, calling out in a low voice, "Daisy! Come on, girl! Here, Daisy!" His voice was hoarse and cracking, but he dared not shout too loudly, lest Frank hear. The highland was quiet except for the chorus of crickets starting up and the distant caw of a crow. Eli pushed through some brambles, his arms and legs getting scratched by thorns as he searched. His mind raced with prayers. Please, please, let me find her. After several minutes of frantic searching, he finally spotted a flash of movement near a rocky outcrop. Daisy was there, nibbling calmly on a patch of wildflowers, oblivious to the trouble she'd caused. Relief surged in Eli. "There you are," he whispered, smiling despite his fear. Gently, he approached the goat, reaching out to grab her by the collar. Daisy skittered a few steps away at first, but Eli produced a soft clicking sound with his tongue, something his mother used to do to call the goats, and the doe responded, trotting back toward him. Eli grasped her collar firmly. "Good girl," he murmured, stroking her neck. "Let's get you home." He led Daisy back toward the pen as fast as her forelegs would go, jogging and stumbling over the uneven ground. The sky had turned a deep purple, the first stars peeking out. As Eli and the goat neared the fenced area, Eli's stomach clenched at the sight of Frank's silhouette by the gate. Frank had noticed the missing goat and Eli's absence and was waiting, fists balled at his sides. Eli's mouth went dry. He gently urged Daisy through the gap in the fence and closed it behind her. Before he could utter a word of explanation, Frank's hand shot out and grabbed Eli by the shoulder. "Where have you been?" Frank's voice was a furious roar in the twilight, his breath reeking of whiskey. I was just—" Eli began, his voice quavering with dread. Frank's grip on Eli's shoulder tightened painfully, cutting him off. "You think you can just run off whenever you feel like it? Thought you could hide, boy?" Frank snarled. In the fading light, his eyes looked wild, and the veins stood out on his neck. Eli winced, the pressure on his shoulder sending sharp pain through his arm. "Daisy got out," he managed to gasp. "I went to find her so she wouldn't be lost. A goat got out because you didn't fix the fence right the first time," Frank interrupted, spittle flying from his lips. "Did I not tell you to mend it properly? You useless little brat." Frank yanked Eli forward and propelled him toward the cabin wall. Eli stumbled, barely catching himself with his hands as he collided against the rough wooden siding. Before he could regain balance, an explosion of pain lit up his back. Frank had unbuckled his worn leather belt and struck Eli hard across the shoulders. Eli cried out, a strangled yelp that was quickly swallowed by the vastness of the surrounding hills. The goats in the pen bleated nervously at the commotion. Frank's face was a mask of rage and cruel satisfaction as he raised the belt again. "Please, I'm sorry," Eli pleaded, shrinking down and covering his head with his arms. The belt lashed down again, this time across the backs of Eli's thin arms. He bit his lip to keep from screaming, but tears sprang to his eyes. The pain was fiery and immediate, and he felt the skin welt under his threadbare shirt. Frank's voice was merciless. "All day I worked to put food on the table, and you can't do one simple thing right," he thundered. Another lash, this one catching Eli's side. Eli curled into a ball on the ground, dirt and dead grass pressing against his cheek. His ears rang with Frank's words and the rush of his own blood. Inside the house, a light had come on. Someone must have heard the shouting. Across the stretch of darkening field, a lone pickup truck driving on the distant road slowed as it approached the property, its headlights cutting beams across the twilight. But Frank was oblivious to everything except his anger. He lifted Eli by the collar of his shirt, forcing the boy to his feet. The fabric tore slightly in Frank's fist. "I feed you, I clothe you, and this is how you repay me?" Frank growled inches from Eli's face. Eli could smell the whiskey and tobacco on his breath and whimpered, tears rolling down his dirty cheeks. Frank raised his hand, still clutching the doubled-over belt. "Maybe a night without supper will teach you, or maybe I should just—" He didn't finish the sentence. At that exact moment, the rumble of an engine and the crunch of gravel came from just beyond the fence. Bright headlights flooded the yard. Nathan Grayson was driving along the winding country road as dusk settled over the Highland. His black SUV navigated the bends carefully. He had taken a detour off the main highway to enjoy the scenic route through the mountains. Nathan was in his early 50s, a distinguished man with kind yet sharp eyes and a streak of silver in his brown hair. He had spent the day visiting a rural community center, his charitable foundation, funded in a nearby county. Now, as he headed back toward the city, he reflected on the stark beauty of the landscape and the pockets of hardship he knew were often hidden in places like this. As his vehicle crested a hill, Nathan's headlights swept over a scene that made his heart jolt. Off to the right, beyond a barbed wire fence, he glimpsed a large man dragging a small boy up against the side of a cabin. The boy's cry of pain cut through the twilight. Nathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In that split second, he saw the man lift a belt and bring it down on the cowering child. "Dear God," Nathan muttered. Without a second thought, he braked hard and pulled the SUV onto the gravel shoulder. A cloud of dust rose as his tires skidded to a stop. Adrenaline surged through him. He could not in good conscience drive by. Not when a child was being beaten right before his eyes. Nathan threw open his door and stepped out into the cool evening air. The distant bleating of goats and the ticking of his cooling engine were the only sounds for a moment. He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment, less for light, his headlights already illuminated the yard, more as a potential tool if things got dangerous. Then he moved swiftly toward the low fence separating the property from the road. "Hey, what's going on here?" Nathan called out, his voice commanding as he approached. His boots crunched on the gravel, and he held one hand up to shield his eyes a little from his own high beams, which lit the yard in stark white. By the cabin wall, the hulking man had paused, momentarily stunned by the interruption. The boy, who looked no older than 7 or 8, was curled on the ground, his thin arms visible and marked by what looked like fresh welts. Nathan felt a surge of anger heat his blood at the sight. The man, Frank, Nathan would soon learn his name, snapped out of his surprise and rounded on Nathan with an ugly scowl. He dropped the boy's collar, letting the child slump against the wall. "Mind your own business," Frank spat, eyes flashing with hostility. "This is my property. Get on out of here." Nathan stepped right up to the fence line, refusing to be intimidated. He could smell alcohol in the air and see the man's unsteady stance. "I'm making it my business," Nathan said firmly. His voice was low and steady, the controlled tone of someone used to being listened to. He fixed Frank with a stare that dared him to object. I saw what you were doing to that boy." Eli, still trembling on the ground, looked up in astonishment. In the harsh lighting, Nathan could see the child's face, streaked with tears, pale with fear, and etched with bruises old and new. The sight was heartbreaking and infuriating all at once. Frank took a few lumbering steps closer, brandishing the belt in his hand. "You've got some nerve, mister," he snarled. "That boy is my son, and I'll discipline him how I see fit. It ain't got nothing to do with you." There was a slight slur in Frank's voice, and he jabbed a finger in Nathan's direction threateningly. Nathan's jaw clenched. He had zero tolerance for child abusers, no matter who they claimed to be. "That's not discipline," he retorted, his tone ice cold. "That's abuse. I won't stand by and watch you hurt him." Frank barked a harsh laugh, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He hadn't expected a stranger to intervene, much less one who stood unflinching before his anger. "You some kind of hero? Think you can waltz in here in your fancy car and tell me how to raise my kid? Last warning, pal. Get back in that car and drive away. This is a family matter." Nathan's heart pounded with righteous fury, but he kept his voice measured. "I'm not leaving," he replied. He could see Frank's rage building, the man's chest heaving. "I won't let you touch him again. I've already called the sheriff." It was a bluff. His phone was in his pocket, but he was prepared to call. "If you care about your family matters, you should know that beating a child is against the law, and immoral, to say the least." Eli's wide eyes moved from Frank to Nathan. The boy was breathing hard, clearly in pain and shock, but Nathan saw something else there too, a flicker of hope. Frank stepped right up to the fence, the two men now only a couple of yards apart. Frank was taller and burly from years of hard labor, but he was also drunk and off balance. Nathan, a former college football player in his youth, still kept fit. He was ready to defend himself, or the boy, if it came to it. The goats bleated nervously in their pen as the tension in the air thickened. "You're going to regret sticking your nose where it doesn't belong," Frank growled. His free hand clutched the fence post as if to steady himself. "Don't you lecture me? I put food on that boy's table, a roof over his head." Nathan cut him off sharply, disgust evident on his face. "And bruises on his back. I saw you. So did anyone else passing on that road." He gestured briefly to the road where another car might come along at any time. He was partly bluffing. This stretch was lonely, but Frank glanced that way uncertainly. Nathan pressed the advantage. "Hurting a child is inexcusable. You lay a hand on him again, and I will make sure you answer for it." Frank's face contorted with fury at being challenged. For a moment, Nathan thought the man might swing the belt at him across the fence. Instead, Frank threw it to the ground and balled up his fists. "You just signed up for a world of trouble, mister," he snarled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Nathan stood firm, his eyes never leaving Frank. "Neither do you," he said quietly, voice laced with resolve. He glanced past Frank to where the boy huddled. The child was watching, eyes huge in the darkness, as if this were some impossible dream that might evaporate. Nathan felt an overwhelming protective instinct. This had to end now. Frank started to climb over the fence, clearly intending to make good on his threat and physically force Nathan off his land. As his boot caught the top rail, he leaned forward aggressively. "I'll beat you to a pulp," he snarled. Nathan stepped back just enough to be out of immediate reach. His hand tightened around the heavy flashlight he'd grabbed, ready to use it in self-defense if needed. His voice rose, ringing out with a fierce authority that stopped Frank in his tracks. "If you touch him one more time," Nathan warned, each word measured and deadly calm, "you'll regret it for the rest of your life." The power of that promise hung in the air, echoing against the darkening sky. Frank froze, with one leg over the fence and the other on the ground, Eli's heart thumped wildly in his chest as he heard those words. Never in his life had someone stood up like this for him, and the weight of it made his breath catch. Nathan's unyielding glare bore into Frank. In that charged moment, the balance of power shifted. The boy wasn't alone anymore, and Frank Miller, faced with a man who clearly meant every word of that threat, found himself at an unexpected disadvantage. For a moment, after Nathan's chilling ultimatum, time seemed frozen. Frank stayed perched halfway over the fence, his face a contorted mask of rage and uncertainty. Eli watched with held breath, a dull ache radiating through his bruised arms and back. Then Frank's temper boiled over. With a guttural yell, he lunged the rest of the way over the fence and charged at Nathan. "You son of a—" he bellowed, swinging a heavy fist wildly at the stranger who dared defy him. Nathan was ready. He sidestepped Frank's telegraphed punch with surprising agility, given the age difference. Frank stumbled forward, thrown off balance by the momentum of his missed swing. Nathan hated violence, but he knew how to handle himself. Years of self-defense classes and a protective instinct kicked in. As Frank swiveled for another attack, Nathan raised the solid metal flashlight in his hand just in time. Frank's second swing collided with the flashlight's shaft instead of Nathan's face, resulting in a painful crack against Frank's knuckles. Frank howled in pain and fury, momentarily reeling. Seizing the chance, Nathan delivered a swift, calculated strike, not with the flashlight, but a firm jab of his free hand against Frank's broad chest. The blow wasn't enough to seriously harm the big man, but it did send him stumbling backward. Off balance and inebriated, Frank's boot caught on a jutting rock in the yard. He went down hard on his backside with a thud, the air leaving his lungs in a whoosh. "Ugh!" Frank gasped, momentarily stunned. The Highland night was filled with the sound of his labored breathing and the distant clamor of goats in their pen. Nathan immediately turned away from the fallen Frank and rushed to Eli. The boy was still huddled by the wall of the cabin, eyes huge in his pale face. Nathan knelt and gently placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. Eli flinched at first, but when he realized this touch was tender, not a strike, he gazed up at Nathan with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Can you walk, son?" Nathan asked softly, concern evident in his tone. Up close, he could see Eli's injuries in grim detail. An angry red welt peeked out from the collar of the boy's shirt, and fresh bruises were forming on his forearms. Nathan's heart clenched at the sight. Eli nodded shakily. "Yes, sir," he whispered, his voice raw from crying. Behind them, Frank was cursing and struggling back to his feet. Nathan cast a glance over his shoulder. The man was on his knees now, shaking off the fall. They had only moments before Frank would come at them again. Nathan slid his arm around Eli's back and helped the boy stand. Eli winced, but didn't protest, desperate to get away from Frank. "Come with me," Nathan said firmly. He half-supported, half-carried Eli away from the cabin and toward the idling SUV on the roadside. The gravel crunched under Nathan's boots and Eli's bare feet. The boy was unsteady, but he clung to Nathan, limping quickly alongside him. By the time they reached the fence, Frank had staggered upright, eyes blazing. "Eli!" Frank shouted hoarsely, a note of panic and fury mingling in his voice. "You get back here, and you—" He jabbed a finger at Nathan, his other hand cradling his lightly fractured knuckles. "You can't just take him. That's kidnapping, you hear me? You're going to pay for this." Nathan ignored the tirade and focused on getting Eli over the low fence. He lifted the boy carefully under the arms and across the wire. Eli let out a whimper as his sore body was jostled, but Nathan was as gentle as possible. Once on the other side, Eli leaned against the SUV, tears streaming silently down his face. Whether from pain, fear, or relief, it was impossible to tell. Nathan quickly vaulted over the fence himself. Frank was lurching toward them across the yard now, spurred on by desperation. "He's my boy!" he hollered into the night. "You have no right." Even in the dimness, Nathan could see the madness in Frank's expression. Part anger, part fear of losing his control over Eli. Nathan yanked open the passenger door. "Get in, Eli," he urged. The boy obeyed as fast as his battered body allowed, scrambling into the seat. Nathan reached over him and pulled the seatbelt across, hands swift but careful. Eli's small fingers clutched at Nathan's sleeve for a second, a wordless plea not to leave him. Nathan squeezed the boy's hand reassuringly. "It's all right. I'm here," he said softly. Frank had reached the fence. He was breathing hard, swaying on his feet. "You're gonna regret this," he barked, though there was a quaver in his voice. "I'll have the law on you, I swear it." Nathan shut Eli's door and turned to face Frank across the fence one final time. "The law?" Nathan replied, raising his voice enough for Frank to hear. "Yes, let's involve the law. Go ahead and call the sheriff, Mr. Miller. I'll be more than happy to show him what you've done to this child." He pointed at Eli, visible through the window, with tears on his cheeks and welts on his skin. "Better yet, I'm calling them myself right now." Frank's bravado faltered. He stood there, chest heaving, uncertainty clouding his drunken eyes. For a split second, it seemed like he didn't know what to do. His power over Eli was slipping away, and a stranger had dared to challenge him with consequences he hadn't planned on. Nathan didn't wait for Frank to respond. He slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. As he did, he grabbed his cell phone from the center console. The SUV's headlights were still bathing Frank in harsh light. He looked suddenly smaller, standing alone in the glow, with dust swirling around him. With one hand on the wheel, Nathan hit 911 on his phone and pressed it to his ear. Frank's eyes widened slightly at that. In the quiet of the cab, Eli could hear the faint sound of the emergency operator answering. Nathan spoke clearly and calmly into the phone. "I'm reporting an incident of child abuse at the Miller property on Old Creek Road. The child is safe with me now, and I'm en route to Pinewood Town Clinic. The abuser is Frank Miller, the child's stepfather. Yes, that's right. Please, send a deputy to secure the scene and take his statement." Frank's mouth moved in what looked like curses, but Nathan could not hear him through the closed windows. Without further hesitation, Nathan put the SUV in gear. The tires kicked up gravel as they pulled onto the road, leaving Frank Miller behind in a cloud of dust and headlights. Eli sat curled in the passenger seat, trembling from adrenaline and pain. Nathan ended the call to 911 after giving all the necessary information and gently set the phone down. The road ahead was dark, except for the reach of the headlights. For a few minutes, the only sound was the hum of the engine as they drove away from the nightmare Eli had lived. Nathan glanced over at the child by his side. In the glow of the dashboard, Eli's face was pale, and he clutched the seatbelt strap across his chest with both hands. He was trying to stifle his sobs, his small frame shuddering with the effort. Nathan's heart ached. He kept one hand on the wheel and with the other reached over to lightly touch Eli's arm. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I promise. You're safe." At those words, Eli finally let out a broken sob. The enormity of what had just happened, the terror, the rescue, crashed over him. Is he going to come after me?" he managed to choke out, eyes wide with lingering fear. "No," Nathan assured him gently. "He won't hurt you again. The police will handle him. I won't let anyone touch you, all right?" Eli stared at Nathan, as if trying to comprehend this unfamiliar kindness. Seeing no hint of anger or deceit in Nathan's face, the boy gave a small, quivering nod. "The thank you," he whispered, voice barely audible. Nathan swallowed against the lump in his throat. "What's your name, son?" "Eli," the boy replied. His voice gained a touch more strength as he added, "Eli Thompson." It had been so long since anyone asked his name with genuine care. "Hello, Eli. I'm Nathan Grayson," the man said, offering a gentle smile despite the circumstances. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe now. There's a doctor in town who can look at those injuries and some friends who want to help." Eli nodded again. Exhaustion was beginning to overtake the adrenaline in his system. The seat, though foreign, felt soft and safe. As the SUV wound down the mountain road toward town, Eli allowed his eyes to close for just a moment. Nathan kept glancing over to make sure the boy was all right. In the back of his mind, Nathan was already forming a plan. Get Eli medical attention, involve the local authorities and child protective services, and ensure this child never had to return to that hateful situation. Under the faint lights of Pinewood's outskirts, Nathan whispered more to himself than to the boy. "You're going to be okay, Eli. I've got you now." In the passenger seat, Eli heard those words and felt, for the first time in a long while, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would truly be okay. By the time Nathan's SUV pulled up to Pinewood Clinic, a small, single-story building near the town square, the night had settled fully. Warm light spilled from the clinic's front windows. Nathan had called ahead, and as he gently carried Eli through the entrance, two figures hurried to greet them. Dr. Susan Hayward, the town physician, stepped forward first. A woman in her early 60s, with steel-grey hair and compassionate eyes, Dr. Susan was already in her scrubs, having opened the clinic after hours for Eli. Right behind her was Sheriff Alan Blake, identifiable by his brown uniform and the concerned frown on his weathered face. "Oh, Eli," Dr. Susan murmured, taking in the boy's battered condition as Nathan eased him onto a gurney. Eli's face was pale under the fluorescent lights, and he gripped Nathan's hand, unwilling to let go. Dr. Susan brushed a gentle hand over Eli's forehead. "It's all right, sweetheart. You're safe here." Sheriff Blake nodded gratefully to Nathan. "I'm glad you got him out," he said in a low voice. Nathan noticed the sheriff's hands trembling slightly as he placed them on his hips. Alan Blake had been born and raised in Pinewood and had known Eli's mother, Mary, for years. The sheriff's voice turned thick. I should have checked on him more. None of us realized how bad it got." Nathan squeezed the sheriff's shoulder in understanding. "He's safe now. That's what matters." As Dr. Susan wheeled Eli toward an examination room, another woman rushed in through the clinic doors. It was Martha Whitaker, still wearing her apron from the diner and looking out of breath. She must have heard the news from the flurry of police activity. Word traveled fast in a small town. Martha's eyes widened as she saw the small figure on the gurney. "Eli, oh dear Lord," she exclaimed, pressing a hand to her mouth. Eli managed a faint smile upon recognizing her. Miss Martha," he croaked. Martha hurried to his side, on the opposite flank of Nathan. "I came as soon as I heard," she told him, tears shining in her eyes. She took Eli's free hand in both of hers. "You're going to be okay, honey. We're all here now." Her voice was gentle, but Nathan could hear the quake of anger beneath it. Anger at Frank. "I always told your mum I'd look after you, and I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner." Martha's tears slipped free, and she dabbed them with the corner of her apron. Eli's eyes filled too, but not from pain this time. "It's okay," he whispered, not wanting her to feel bad. He was overwhelmed. People who cared were surrounding him, something he hadn't felt in so long. Dr. Susan cleared her throat softly. "Martha, let's give Eli a moment to breathe while I check him over. Nathan, you can stay with him. Sheriff, I'll need to document his injuries for the report." Nathan stayed at Eli's side, holding the boy's hand as Dr. Susan conducted a careful examination in the clinic room. She spoke softly as she worked, telling Eli each step before she did it. "I'm just going to lift your shirt now, honey. I need to see where you're hurt." Despite her calm demeanor, Nathan saw Dr. Susan's jaw tighten when she raised Eli's tattered shirt to find dark purple bruises blooming across his ribs and back. Martha sucked in a sharp breath, turning her face away for a moment to hide her anguish. Sheriff Blake silently removed his hat and looked down, his expression grim. Eli hissed in pain, but kept still as Dr. Susan gently palpated his ribs. "You're being so brave," she soothed. She checked the welt on his shoulder and the bruises on his arms. "Nothing feels broken, which is good," she announced. "Just bruises and a few cuts. We'll get you cleaned up and bandaged, all right?" Eli nodded, his little fingers still wrapped around Nathan's. The boy's eyes rarely left Nathan, as if making sure his rescuer was still there. Each time Nathan met that gaze, he offered an encouraging smile. While Dr. Susan began cleaning the cuts on Eli's arms, Sheriff Blake stepped outside to speak on his radio. Martha helped by handing Dr. Susan supplies, antiseptic wipes, gauze, medical tape, her hands shaking with emotion as she did. Within half an hour, Eli was cleaned and bandaged. Dr. Susan had given him a mild painkiller for the aches. Color was returning to his cheeks, and exhaustion weighed heavy on him. Nathan could see the boy fighting to keep his eyes open, perhaps afraid that if he slept, this newfound safety might vanish. A knock at the exam room door signaled another arrival. A slender woman with auburn hair and a kind face peered in. "May I come in?" she asked softly. Nathan recognized her from a brief introduction outside. This was Claire Thompson, no relation to Eli despite the last name, a social worker from Child Protective Services who had been called in by the sheriff. Dr. Susan nodded, finishing the last of the bandaging. Claire stepped in and offered a gentle smile to Eli. "Hi, Eli. My name is Claire. I'm here to make sure you're taken care of." She looked at Nathan appreciatively. "And you must be Mr. Grayson. I've heard about what you did." "Thank you, Nathan," inclined his head. "I'm just glad I was there in time," he replied. Claire approached the bedside slowly, crouching so she was on eye level with Eli. "How are you feeling, kiddo?" she asked. Eli looked to Nathan, then back at Claire. "Sore," he admitted. Claire's eyes were full of sympathy. "I bet. You've had a rough day." She glanced at Dr. Susan, who gave her a brief nod indicating Eli's condition. "The sheriff has Mr. Frank Miller in custody now," Claire told Eli gently. "He won't be able to come near you." Eli let out a breath of relief he didn't know he was holding. Nathan felt Eli's grip on his hand relax just a little at that news. Claire continued softly, "We're going to make sure you have a safe place to stay. Normally, we'd arrange a foster home or send you to the children's center in the city, but—" She hesitated, seeing the alarm flare in Eli's eyes at the idea of being taken somewhere else that night. Nathan spoke up, firm yet polite. "Claire, if it helps, I can stay with him. I don't want him to feel alone or afraid." Martha quickly added, "I have a spare room at my house. I could watch over him tonight as well if needed. He knows me." Claire looked between them, clearly weighing options. Procedures and paperwork swirled through her mind, but she also saw Eli's terrified face at the thought of being separated from the people he trusted right now. "Given the circumstances," she said at last, "we can arrange something temporary. Perhaps an officer or I can stay too, just to satisfy protocol." Sheriff Blake had re-entered quietly and spoke up, voice gentle. "My wife and I live just down the road. We've been foster parents before. Eli can stay with us tonight, and Nathan and Martha, you're welcome to come too, if that'll make him more comfortable. We've got plenty of room." Eli looked up at Nathan anxiously. He didn't know the sheriff's family well, but he desperately wanted Nathan to stay by his side. Nathan exchanged a glance with Claire, then with Martha. "If that's okay with everyone, I'd like to stay with Eli," Nathan said. Claire nodded, smiling. "I think that's a fine idea for tonight. We'll sort out formal arrangements in the morning." Relief washed over Eli's face. He mustered a tired, small smile. Thank you," he said softly to all of them. Martha gently caressed his hair. "We're all here for you, Eli. You just rest now, sugar." Dr. Susan finished writing some notes and stepped back. "Eli, you did very well. You're all patched up. How about we let you get some sleep?" It didn't take much convincing. Exhaustion and the pain medication were dragging Eli's eyelids down. Nathan scooped the boy up into his arms to carry him to Sheriff Blake's nearby house as everyone began to move. Eli instinctively snuggled against Nathan's chest, safe in the circle of his protector's embrace. As they all headed out into the cool night, Martha holding the door, Claire carrying Eli's little bag of prescribed medicines, Sheriff Blake leading the way, Eli's eyes closed, finally letting himself drift into sleep. He knew he was surrounded by people who truly cared, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt utterly safe. Sunlight filtered softly through the clinic window the next morning when Eli awoke. For a split second, he didn't remember where he was. Then he saw Nathan dozing in a chair beside him and felt the dull ache of his bruises. Reality set in, and with it a sense of safety. This wasn't home. But he was not with Frank anymore. Martha arrived early, bringing warm oatmeal sweetened with honey for Eli. He ate hungrily, the comforting taste filling the hollow in his stomach. Dr. Susan gave him a mild pain reliever and a gentle checkup, pleased that he had slept through the night. Later that morning, Claire explained the next steps. Eli would stay temporarily at the county children's shelter, a safe place where caregivers could look after him until a more permanent plan was in place. Hearing this, Eli's eyes flickered with worry. Will Nathan be there?" he asked softly. Nathan crouched beside him. "I'll visit you every day," he promised, "and I'll make sure you have everything you need. You won't be alone." That reassured Eli enough to nod, though he clung to Nathan's hand until it was time to leave. Claire drove them to the shelter 2 towns over, a big, homey house where several children lived under the care of trained staff. The transition was daunting for Eli. He stood in the doorway of the bright playroom, shoulders drawn up anxiously. A caretaker showed him a cozy bunk bed he'd use and introduced a couple of other children. Eli offered them a timid wave, but hovered close to Nathan's side. Nathan spent a long time helping Eli settle in that first day. He unpacked the small bag of clothes and items Martha and Claire had put together for Eli. He placed a new stuffed teddy bear, a gift from the sheriff's wife, on the bed. "This is a nice place," Nathan said, sitting next to the boy. "It's safe. And remember, it's not forever." Eli nodded silently, twisting the hem of his shirt. When it came time for Nathan to go home that evening, Eli's eyes brimmed with tears. Nathan knelt and pulled him into a hug. "I'll be back tomorrow. You can count on it." Eli pressed his face into Nathan's shoulder for a moment, then released him with a brave attempt at a smile. True to his word, Nathan visited the shelter every single day. Each afternoon, his black SUV would pull into the drive, and Eli would race to the window with anticipation. They spent hours together in the common room or the backyard, kicking around a soccer ball, drawing pictures, or doing Eli's schoolwork. Claire had arranged tutoring until he could enroll in school. Day by day, Eli grew more at ease. He even started to play with the other children a little, though he was happiest when Nathan was there. At night, if Eli woke from a nightmare about Frank, The staff allowed him to call Nathan on the phone, and Nathan always answered, no matter how late it was. He would speak in a calm, steady voice over the line until Eli's shaking voice grew drowsy and the bad dreams faded away. "You're safe now," Nathan gently reminded him each time. "He can't hurt you ever again." Those words became like a soothing spell, helping Eli sleep through the rest of the night. In the nurturing environment of the shelter, and with Nathan's unwavering support, Eli's wounds began to heal. The bruises on his skin yellowed and disappeared. His timid silence gave way to occasional laughter when Nathan told a corny joke or made a funny face. The staff noted how the little boy's eyes, once clouded with fear, started to shine a bit brighter each day. About a month later, during one of Nathan's afternoon visits, Claire arrived with an update. Pulling Nathan aside, but within Eli's view, she said, "Good news. The judge approved your foster care application." They had fast-tracked Nathan's background check and home inspection, given his clear record and stable life. Now the path was officially open for Eli to live with Nathan as his foster son, a first step toward adoption. That evening, Nathan found a quiet moment to sit with Eli under a tree in the shelter's yard. "How would you feel about coming to live at my house?" Nathan asked gently. "Not just visits, but for good. At least until we sort out a more permanent family for you." He wanted to phrase it carefully, not to assume too much, despite his growing desire to be that permanent family. Eli's breath caught in his throat. You mean it?" he whispered. "I could stay with you? Like family?" Nathan's eyes stung with sudden emotion. He reached over and took Eli's hand. "Yes, if you want to. I'd be your foster dad for now. We can live together, and I'll take care of you every day." Eli didn't respond in words. He threw his small arms around Nathan's middle, holding him tightly. Nathan felt the boy nodding vigorously against his chest. "All right then," Nathan murmured, his voice warm and gentle. He pulled back slightly to look at Eli's face. "We'll start tomorrow. We'll pack your things and you'll come home with me." Eli wiped a happy tear from his cheek. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. In the fading golden light of that afternoon, he clung to Nathan's hand, afraid to blink in case this promise might vanish. But it was real. After weeks of waiting and hoping, he wasn't just going to have a safe haven. He was going to have a home. 2 months later, on a crisp morning, Eli found himself clutching Nathan's hand in a county courthouse. Today was the day Frank Miller would face justice. The courtroom was intimidating with its wooden benches and solemn seal of the state mounted on the wall. But Nathan was right beside Eli, and on the row behind them sat familiar faces: Martha, Claire, Sheriff Blake, and Dr. Susan, all there to support Eli and testify as needed. Frank was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. Eli's stomach did a little flip at the sight of his stepfather in an orange prison jumpsuit, but the boy steadied when Nathan's hand gave his a gentle squeeze. Frank cast a scornful glance toward Eli and Nathan, but he looked different now, smaller somehow, and deflated. Eli realized he wasn't afraid of Frank anymore. The hearing was thorough, but moved swiftly. Frank had been charged with multiple counts of child abuse and neglect. He had initially pleaded not guilty, trying to claim that he'd only been disciplining a misbehaving child. But the evidence to the contrary was overwhelming. Nathan testified calmly about what he witnessed on the Highland that evening, describing Frank's beating and the exact words of his own intervention. Dr. Susan presented medical reports detailing Eli's injuries, new and old scars alike, painting a heartbreaking picture of prolonged abuse. Claire spoke about her attempts to check on Eli's welfare and how Frank had stonewalled her, and Martha tearfully recounted small signs of Eli's suffering that she regretted overlooking for so long. Eli listened to the testimonies with a lump in his throat. It was hard hearing all of it laid out, but he kept reminding himself, it's not happening anymore. Nathan's arm stayed around Eli's shoulders the whole time, a steady comfort. When it came time for sentencing, Frank had no real defense. His court-appointed attorney muttered something about alcohol problems and stress, but nothing excused the cruelty inflicted on an 8-year-old boy. Before the judge passed sentence, she offered Frank a chance to speak. Frank stood, shackled at the wrists, and turned to face the courtroom. For a fleeting moment, Eli wondered if he'd apologize. Maybe not to him directly, but just say he was sorry for what he'd done. Frank opened his mouth, his jaw working. But no apology came. Instead, he spat out bitterly, "All this fuss over a kid that ain't even mine by blood. I did what I had to. You folks don't know what it's like, raising a kid on your own with no help." "Enough," the judge interjected sharply, her gavel cracking once. Frank fell sullenly silent under her steely stare. Judge Ramirez was a stern, middle-aged woman with clear eyes that looked over the courtroom and settled on Eli for a moment. Her gaze softened as she addressed the room. "Mr. Miller, whatever hardships you faced, there is no excuse for the abuse you inflicted. A child is not a punching bag." She then delivered the sentence: 15 years in state prison, the maximum penalty given the charges and prior incidents that had come to light during the investigation. She also signed an order terminating Frank's parental rights over Eli permanently. A collective breath seemed to exhale from those present. Eli didn't fully understand the length of the sentence, but he knew it was a long time. Long enough that Frank wouldn't be able to come near him until well into his adulthood, if ever. Frank's shoulders slumped as the judge finished. He was led out of the courtroom, hands bound, a defeated scowl on his face. He did not look back. As soon as the judge adjourned the hearing, Martha let out a quiet cheer and dabbed at her eyes. Sheriff Blake gently patted Eli's back. "It's over now, son," the sheriff said kindly. "He got what he deserved." Eli nodded slowly. It felt strange, a mix of relief, sadness, and closure swirling inside. Relief won out. Frank was truly gone from his life. Nathan knelt next to Eli's chair, coming to eye level. "You okay?" he asked softly. Eli took a moment to listen to his own heart. The tightness he used to feel whenever he thought of Frank was easing, like a dark cloud lifting to let in sun. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think I'm okay." Nathan smiled and pulled him into a hug right there in the courtroom. "You were so brave," he murmured into Eli's hair. Eli felt a couple of Nathan's tears warm against his scalp, and he realized his new father, for that is how he thought of Nathan now, was crying quietly in relief and joy. Claire joined them, her voice gentle. "Eli, with Frank's rights terminated, the path is clear now for adoption. If that's what you and Nathan want." She knew it was, but she asked out of respect. Nathan and Eli exchanged a glance. Nathan raised his eyebrows as if to say, "It's up to you." Eli didn't need any more prompting. "I want Nathan to be my family," he said clearly, his small voice echoing in the now emptying courtroom. Martha gave a little sob of happiness behind them. Nathan's eyes shone. He scooped Eli up into his arms, lifting him off the ground in a joyful embrace. "And I want you to be mine, Eli," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll make it official as soon as possible." Judge Ramirez, who was collecting her papers a few feet away, overheard those words. She paused and offered the pair a rare smile. "I'll look forward to signing those adoption papers," she said warmly. "Congratulations, Mr. Grayson, and to you too, Eli. You've both been through a lot to get here." Eli blushed and hid his face against Nathan's shoulder, overwhelmed with happiness. He had entered this courthouse terrified, but he was leaving it with justice served and a new future to look forward to. Surrounded by the good people who had stood by him, he felt lighter than air. As they all walked out of the courtroom together into the bright mid-morning sun, Eli reached up and took Nathan's hand in his own. The past was finally behind them, and a new life, a better life, was just beginning. A week after the trial, Nathan carried a sleepy Eli over the threshold of his house, a warm two-story home in a leafy suburb outside the city. It was late evening, and Eli had dozed off in the car. Now he blinked awake as Nathan gently set him on his feet in the foyer. "Welcome home, Eli," Nathan said softly. Eli looked around in amazement. The house was cozy and inviting. The living room off the foyer had a plush sofa and a soft throw blanket draped over the back, and the scent of vanilla lingered in the air. Nathan led him through the rooms, pointing out things casually. "Here's the kitchen, and over there's the dining room." But Eli was barely hearing the words. He was marveling that this beautiful place was going to be his home. Upstairs, Nathan pushed open a door to what would be Eli's bedroom. The walls were painted a gentle sky blue, and a window overlooked a backyard oak tree. On the bed was a navy comforter patterned with stars, and propped against the pillows was a brand-new stuffed dog with floppy ears. On a small desk in the corner lay a stack of drawing paper and crayons, waiting for him. Eli stepped inside, eyes wide. This is for me," he breathed. "All yours," Nathan affirmed, smiling. "I had some help getting it ready. We wanted you to feel at home." Eli picked up the stuffed dog reverently. It was soft and big enough to hug. Emotion thickened his voice. "Thank you. It's amazing." He paused. "Can I name him?" "Of course," Nathan chuckled. "He's yours, after all." Eli hugged the plush pup thoughtfully. "I think I'll call him Chester," he decided shyly. "Hello, Chester," Nathan said, giving the toy a pat. "I think you're going to love it here." Eli managed a grin, the first real smile Nathan had seen in a long time. "I think so too," he whispered. After unpacking a few clothes and prized belongings, Nathan helped Eli change into soft new pajamas decorated with little rockets. The boy yawned, weariness catching up to him after the long day. Nathan pulled back the covers of Eli's bed, and Eli climbed in, sinking into the softest mattress he had ever felt. Nathan tucked the blanket around him. "Comfy?" he asked. Eli nodded. The room was dim and peaceful. He clutched Chester under one arm. Nathan sat at the edge of the bed, his face gentle in the glow of the nightlight. "If you need anything, if you have a bad dream or feel scared, my room's just down the hall," he promised. Eli felt a surge of affection and safety. He reached out and took Nathan's hand, small fingers curling around Nathan's larger ones. In a timid voice he said, "Good night, Dad." Nathan's breath hitched. He gave Eli's hand a tender squeeze, his eyes shining. "Good night, son," he whispered. Sweet dreams. In the months that followed, life settled into a joyful routine at the Grayson house. Each weekday morning, Nathan made Eli a packed lunch and walked him to the school bus stop. Every evening, they ate dinner together and talked about their day. On weekends, they visited parks, baked cookies in the kitchen, or played catch under the oak tree in the backyard. With every bedtime story, every reassuring hug after a bad dream, every peal of laughter shared, Eli grew more confident and secure. They were, in every way that mattered, already a family. And soon, it would become official. The adoption hearing took place in Pinewood's modest courthouse on a bright summer morning. The same judge who had sentenced Frank now sat beaming down at Eli and Nathan from the bench. Only this time, the courtroom atmosphere was joyful and expectant. Gathered in the first rows were Martha, Claire, Sheriff Blake, Doctor, Susan, and a few friendly faces from town who had come to witness this happy occasion. Eli sat at the petitioner's table beside Nathan, swinging his legs anxiously under the chair, not from fear, but from excitement. Nathan gently put an arm around his shoulders, and Eli flashed him an eager grin. Judge Ramirez cleared her throat, though she too wore a smile. "We're here today in the matter of the adoption of Eli Thompson," she began. "Mr. Nathan Grayson has petitioned to become Eli's legal father." The formal words made Eli's heart thump with anticipation. After a few procedural questions for Nathan, confirming his name, address, and intent to adopt, the judge peered kindly over her glasses at Eli. "Young man, can you please state your name for the record?" Eli sat up straight. "My name is Eli," he paused, then added proudly, "Eli Thompson Grayson, Your Honor." A soft chuckle rippled through the room. Nathan's eyes glistened as he squeezed Eli's hand. The judge's smile widened. "Well, I'd say that answers my next question," she said. "But just for formality, Eli, do you want Mr. Grayson to be your dad and to live with him as your family from now on?" "Yes, ma'am. More than anything," Eli replied, his voice clear and sure. "And Mr. Grayson," Judge Ramirez continued, turning to Nathan, "do you promise to love and care for Eli as your own son for all the days of your life?" Nathan's voice caught in his throat for a second as emotion swelled. "I do, Your Honor. With all my heart." Martha sniffled loudly into a handkerchief, and even Sheriff Blake had to blink hard a few times. Judge Ramirez nodded, looking pleased. "Then I see no reason to delay. By the power vested in me by the state, I hereby approve the adoption. Eli Thompson Grayson," she addressed the boy with a grin, "you officially have a forever family. Congratulations." She brought down her gavel lightly, and the courtroom erupted in gentle cheers and applause. Nathan scooped Eli into a hug, lifting him off the ground as everyone clapped. Eli threw his arms around Nathan's neck, feeling an overflow of pure happiness. Martha and Claire hurried over first, both dabbing tears of joy. "Oh, Eli, sweet boy, you got your happy ending," Martha cried, giving him a kiss on the cheek before wrapping both Nathan and Eli in a warm, grandmotherly hug. Claire offered her congratulations and ruffled Eli's hair affectionately, noting how at peace he looked. Dr. Susan hugged Nathan and then Eli, remarking, "Your mother would be so proud, Eli." He believed it was true. Somehow, he felt she knew and was smiling on him today. Finally, Judge Ramirez stepped down from the bench to hand Nathan and Eli the official adoption certificate. In a rare casual moment, she said, "I rarely get to see outcomes as uplifting as this. You take care of each other now." "We will," Nathan promised, shaking her hand. Eli nodded vigorously, clutching the certificate against his chest like a treasure. As they all filtered out of the courtroom into the sunshine, Sheriff Blake pulled out his phone. "All right, everyone, how about a photo of the new family?" On the courthouse steps, Nathan knelt beside Eli while their friends gathered around them. In the picture that followed, Eli's grin was gap-toothed and radiant, Nathan's arm was wrapped around his son, and a small town's worth of love surrounded them. Eli realized, as the camera flashed, that he had everything he'd ever dreamed of now: a father who loved him, friends who felt like an extended family, and a future that was bright and open. He silently whispered a thank you to his mama somewhere above, and to anyone listening, for bringing Nathan into his life. He was home. Forever. Later that afternoon, after the adoption ceremony, Nathan and Eli took a drive up the winding road to the Highland above Pinewood. The late-day sun cast a golden sheen over the grasses and rocky outcrops. This was the same plateau where Eli had once herded goats under very different circumstances. Today, he returned not as a frightened boy under a tyrant's thumb, but hand in hand with his father, ready to face the past and say a proper goodbye. They stopped near the old Miller property. The dilapidated cabin still stood, now empty and quiet. The goat pen's gate hung open, swaying gently in the breeze. Eli gazed at the familiar yard, where so many unhappy memories had played out. He felt a slight shiver, recalling cold mornings and harsh words. But then Nathan's warm presence at his side brought him back to the present. "You all right?" Nathan asked softly. Eli nodded. "It's strange. Seeing it now," he said. They stood by the fence line where Nathan had once confronted Frank. The place seemed smaller than Eli remembered, almost forlorn. "I used to think I'd be stuck here forever," he admitted. Nathan knelt down, putting an arm around Eli's shoulders. "You're free of this place, Eli. You never have to come back here again if you don't want to." "I know," Eli replied, leaning into Nathan. "I wanted to come back just this once, so I can leave it behind for good." With that, they returned to the car and drove a little farther up the hill to a small country cemetery nestled under a stand of cedar trees. Eli's mother was buried there, marked by a simple stone that Nathan and Martha had helped him choose months ago. Eli approached the grave, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked by the roadside. Nathan hung back a few respectful steps to give him privacy, though he remained close enough for comfort. "Hi, Mama," Eli whispered, kneeling and placing the wildflowers gently at the base of the headstone. The carved letters of her name, Mary Thompson, glinted in the sunlight. I wanted to tell you that I'm okay. I have a home now. A real home. Nathan's taking good care of me. He's my dad now." Eli smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I wish you could meet him. You'd like him, Mama. I know you would." A soft breeze stirred the grass, and Eli closed his eyes, imagining it was his mother's spirit wrapping him in a warm embrace. He felt no sadness now, only love and a gentle peace. "I love you," he murmured. "I won't ever forget you. Thank you for watching over me." After a quiet moment, Eli stood, and Nathan came forward, wrapping an arm around him. They lingered by Mary's grave together, the father and son soaking in the tranquility of the highland in the late afternoon glow. High above, a familiar cry echoed, the keening call of a red-tailed hawk circling in the vivid blue sky. Eli shielded his eyes and watched the bird soar freely on the wind currents. He remembered how, not so long ago, he had envied that hawk, wishing he too could fly far away to escape his life. But standing here now, Eli realized he no longer needed wings to be free. He had found freedom in the love and protection of those around him. "Ready to go, son?" Nathan asked, gently after a while. Eli took a final fond look at his mother's resting place and the sprawling highland beyond, bathed in golden light. All the fear and pain that had once lived here were now just memories, laid to rest, like the flowers on Mary's grave. He reached up and took Nathan's hand firmly in his own. "I'm ready," he said, voice clear and filled with hope. Together they walked back toward the car, leaving the Highlands' long shadows behind them. Eli didn't look back at the old cabin or the past that had haunted him. He had everything he needed right beside him. As they descended the winding road toward home, the sun began to set over the highland, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, closing one chapter of Eli's life and illuminating the open road of his future, bright and full of promise. Eli's story isn't just about a boy who escaped the shadows and found the light. It's a quiet reminder to all of us that sometimes It only takes one person brave enough to stop, to speak up, to care, to change a child's life forever. In real life, we may not be millionaires like Mr. Nathan Grayson, but often all it takes is a glance of concern, a simple question, or just being there at the right time. And that can become someone's miracle. Let's listen more. Let's look a little deeper, because behind every door, in every quiet house, there might be a child like Eli, silently hoping for someone to reach out. As for me, the one telling you this story, I believe this. Kindness doesn't have to be grand, just timely. And justice doesn't always begin in a courtroom. Sometimes it begins in the heart of someone who refuses to look away. To the dear women listening, especially those of you in your golden years, I wonder, are you sitting by your window right now, maybe with a warm cup of tea? Did today's story stir something inside you? A memory of being hurt, or perhaps of someone who once protected you when the world turned cold? I wish you a gentle evening. May your heart stay soft enough to keep believing in goodness, even when life has tried to wear you down. And if this story touched you, would you leave a little comment? Just so I know that in this big world, we've found a quiet moment of connection. Through empathy.